So, who heard this week that the sky is falling? The SpaceX launch with all the satellites.
Oh, yes.
All right? The night sky is going to be destroyed. We're not going to be able to do astrophotography anymore. The progress is marching on and civilization is running. So I have sort of a different perspective on that I'd like to share. I think it is a serious problem. Well, it could be a serious problem, but it's not quite as bad as everybody is making it out to be for a number of reasons. There are really 4 things we need to be worried about. One is space junk. A lot of people are very worried that we're launching so many satellites and there's already enough stuff up there. They're right. We do have a lot of satellites up there. I'm going to bring that up again in a minute. And we do need to be very careful about it. There are whole conferences on satellite tracking. There's a whole industry. This is like talking to flat earthers sometimes. They really don't know anything about science. It all seems very mysterious to them and they're very scared. If you don't know anything about the satellite industry, it probably scares you to death that there's going to be 12,000 satellites in this constellation. The 12,000 satellites in this constellation is the tip of the iceberg. It's going to be even worse. And I'm not saying it's not a problem that doesn't have to be mitigated and carefully taken care of. All I want to do is say there are thousands of people in this world who are looking at that and working on that. And I'm not saying they're going to fix it or they're going to solve it, but I'm going to say it's not a mysterious thing that we have nobody has any idea what's going on. Second concern is the radio frequencies from these can interfere with radio astronomy. That is, out of all the concerns, I think that's actually the most important concern. We sort of have to trust that SpaceX is going to cooperate with the radio astronomers. We know how trustworthy corporations tend to be historically. So that is something that if you want to make a lot of noise on the internet and say, hey, astronomy is important, please do that because all of this public outreach does get SpaceX's attention, and that is something that needs to be carefully monitored and worked out between SpaceX and the radio astronomers. All right, 2 other concerns. The third concern, I actually have the least, I'm the most hopeful about, which is that we're going to destroy the night sky because there's going to be so many satellites. So I actually took a picture, and I'll show it to you later when I give my McDonald talk. There's a beautiful Milky Way, and I even posted it on Facebook. It said, how long will we be able to take pictures like this? Well, I want you to realize that in that photograph, there are already hundreds of satellites, and you can't see them. You can see satellites. Depends on where they are, how high they are, how big they are, and how shiny they are. This International Space Station, bear in mind, is slightly larger than a football field and is only a couple 100 kilometers up. These Starlink satellites are much smaller. They're going to be much higher. Yes, they are going to catch sunlight, but they're going to be very small. There are lots, it's called the LEO, Low Earth Orbit Satellite. There are lots of LEO satellites going over your head all the time if you can't see without binoculars or a telescope. If they're careful and they try to mitigate the albedo like they promised they would, again, how trustworthy are corporations? That is something to make sure, hey, you can do this responsibly. You can do this so that it does not destroy the natural beauty of the night sky, and we should hold them accountable to it. The only thing I'm trying to tell people is it can be done. They can have those, you ever heard the phrase, you can't have your cake and eat it too? It's a ridiculous phrase. It's your cake. You can eat it if you want to. The correct phrase is you can't eat your cake and have it too. Because once you've eaten it, you can't have it because it's gone. That's the paradox that people try to do. But if you have cake, anyway, I'm getting off on topic again. This is what happens when you put nerds in front of people. So it can be mitigated. They can put those satellites up there, and they can do it in such a way that does not destroy the night sky. What about the pictures of the satellites, and they're really bright? Those satellites are not fully deployed. They're really close together, much closer than they're going to be when they're deployed, and they're much lower and bigger and brighter than when they're going to be deployed. We don't know how bright they're going to be until they're fully deployed where they belong. And if they get where they belong, and we can see them naked eye, we have a problem and they need to fix it. It can be fixed. Make them fix it. Don't worry, don't worry that it can't be fixed. We have to stop all satellites I'm actually very excited about the idea of a worldwide communications network. Think about it, anybody with one day, anybody with a cell phone anywhere in the world can make a phone call. And it's not just for Facebook, it actually can save lives and improve the lives of a lot of people. So this is the sort of thing in civilization that is kind of a nice thing to have. The third problem is for deep sky astrophotography. Every time I see somebody say a satellite ruins a deep sky astrophoto, I roll my eyes because I'm like, have you ever done deep sky astrophotography? We take multiple exposures and we stack them with sigma rejection, and it gets. I've got rejection maps of planes and satellites going all across them. It's not that big a deal. Now, it's not that big a deal if you're a pretty science guy. Barbara Harris is here. I'm going to take this opportunity to put you on the spot. What about for real science? Is that a problem for real science?
Well, I can only comment about photometry, and the only thing you have to worry about is if it goes directly over your star.
Okay.
And that happens to me like once every few months. I have to reject an image because it goes over one of the, either my target star or comparison star. So it's not that big of a deal. Like I have them in the image all the time, so it doesn't matter as long as it's not going over one of your stars.
Okay, fair enough. So for some types of science, it might require you take 2 pictures every night in case one of them has a satellite going
Well,
across it.
usually I take anywhere from 3 to 5 images of a star anyway. I don't just take one. I take about 3 to 5 if I'm doing photometry of a particular star.
Okay. And when they're deployed, the satellites are going to be like 6 full moons apart from each other. So it's not going to be this dense mesh of satellites in every single photo that you try to take.
Still a lot of them. 12,000 of them.
12,000, yeah. Well, the sky's pretty big. I would like to go out to a dark sky site and look up and see the Milky Way without a whole bunch of Coca-Cola signs and things going through there. It's kind of cool when I see a satellite, because every now and then I see a satellite. If there's satellites all over the place, it's not going to be quite as cool, and I acknowledge that. Bob?
What is the authority for approving these things? Is it just a wild frontier up there?
It's kind of, yeah. So who's the authority? Who's in charge in outer space? Here's the scary answer. Nobody. So they have conferences. They all get together. People from different companies, people from different countries, they get together and they agree on rules. Like CubeSats. If you launch a CubeSat out of the United States, we've agreed CubeSats have to have a certain type of orbit so that they will decay within a few years. So we're not going to have every time you see somebody launching up CubeSats, it's not really contributing as much space junk as you think it is because they only last a couple of years. They only put them in certain orbits so that they will decay within a few years. So if we stopped all launches right now, in 10 years, all the CubeSats would be gone anyway. However, a lot of countries just do whatever they want. It was India, China blew up a satellite just to see if they could. Then India blows up a satellite just to see if they could. So if they're not responsible, it won't matter because we won't be able to put things up there anyway. And they'll have a nice pristine sky. But imagine a world without GPS. Imagine a world without instant communications around the world. We've kind of gotten used to that. Do we want to give that up? Is there a way to do that responsibly? There is a way to do that responsibly.
When we went to the University of Florida.
And we need to, and I don't know how, I don't have a plan for how to do that responsibly, but we need to make noise and try to make people do that responsibly, because it can be done responsibly. We can have our cake and eat it too. It's our cake. Nobody's telling us we can't eat it. We can have a modern world with all of these conveniences, all of these life-saving things, and not destroy the natural beauty of the world. All we need is the will to do it, and maybe the pressure to do it as well.
With his family and so forth.
Anybody else? Dissenting of you or to add? Yes.
Comes back to where he used to work.
Briefly touched
The
on it,
name
but
may show up somewhere.
space junk,
If it
all
does,
that crap floating around. satellites or
Yeah.
other missions that we've launched up there, other satellites we've launched up there, all these jump behind it.
Speech is a little bit.
Eventually it comes down and burns up, but there's a lot of energy.
There is a god awful lot of it up there. And I can also tell you,
It's dangerous to other missions. I mean, when the shuttles had a cracked windshield from a pink chip.
well, we lost the shuttle due to foam that wasn't even in orbit. So something in orbit could hit it. Now, we do have very good capabilities for tracking that space junk. A large part of the business, a large part of what pays my salary is satellite tracking. I'm not involved in the satellite tracking so much as it brings a lot of money into the company that pays me. So I know a lot about it. I know more than average about it, but I'm not an expert. And I've been to some conferences, which means I know just enough to talk a whole lot and sound like I know what I'm talking about to know nothing. If there's anybody out here actually in the business, you know that I don't know a scratch of what I need to know about it. We're pretty good at tracking these things because what happens is a lot of satellites get launched and then get abandoned. They run out of fuel, they can't maneuver them anymore, and they're just there. And we need to know where they are because other satellites need to say, oh, there's something coming, and it's going to be within 10 kilometers. There's bubbles around everything. If something's going to run into your bubble, they put out a news alert. It goes around through this community. The satellite community goes, something's going to run into my bubble. And it's in everybody in that community's interest to protect everybody else. Because if his space junk blows up your satellite, pieces from your satellite can hit my satellite. So I do care if his thing hits yours because it can affect me. And so there is a bit of a self-preservation aspect to it. So by the way, we're doing an experiment. We're recording the program tonight. We are tentatively thinking about maybe possibly we would like to live stream meetings in the future. So if you miss a meeting, you can get on YouTube. Or if somebody says something incriminating in front of an audience that he wasn't supposed to say, you can always pull it up on YouTube and show it to everybody else. So that's really great. It's also going to require that we maybe up our game a little bit on our content and our presentation skills because, you're on YouTube, you're a star now, and we don't want to be targets for anything. So yeah, there's that as well. Let's see, one other thing, but how we doing on time? Okay, it's almost time. I get 2 minutes. If you missed the Jupiter opposition on Monday, we are out here at the college up by the Student Center. I will tell you the truth. The unvarnished truth is it rained and it thundered all day long, and I did not want to go. And I was this close to bailing on my good dear friends. I was like, I'm not going tonight. It's going to be hot and steamy and nasty and cloudy and horrible. And I drug myself up here anyway, and it was fan-freaking-tastic. Justin, our good luck charm, was there. The clouds cleared out. I got here 7:30 or so, and people were already looking at the moon. By 8 o'clock, the moon was perfectly clear, and most of the beginning of the night, we mostly looked at the moon because the moon was there. We had a few hundred people at least came by. Do we have an official count, Derek?
It's about 275.
275? I know I was busy. There was a huge line. I had a cell phone adapter, and people were taking pictures of Jupiter and the moon with their cell phones. I really didn't think they would be able to take pictures of Jupiter with their cell phone, and they were. And I can say the seeing was exceptional. I have no idea why, right after a storm, but Jupiter was phenomenal. I had a little 7-inch scope, and I'll tell you what, the red spot, a lot of times I'm like, yeah, that's where the red spot is, I can tell, but it was just boom, in your face. And the clouds had little squiggly things in them. It's just fantastic. It was really, really good event. So you missed it if you weren't here. If you were there, yay. If you copped out like I almost did, now you're sorry. All right, so any other last minute things? We're going to kind of rearrange our meetings also moving forward. We're going to do the main program first, so you don't have to sit through all the committee things and the meeting programs. That also works out great for guest speakers, so they don't have to sit here for an hour and listen to us pat ourselves on the back and talk about all kinds of boring stuff. So we're going to do that after, really exciting things. We're going to talk about that after the main program, and we're going to start with the main program now, which is Derek. I would introduce Derek, but everybody knows Derek. Derek has a little show. He went on a little trip. He's going to tell us about it.
My name's Derek Demeter. I wear two hats. One of the hats is I serve as the observing chair here for the Astronomical Society, and I also run the planetarium director. Professionally, that's what I do for a living. And what I got a chance to do as part of the International Planetarium Society is we did a cultural exchange program with two German planetarians back in 2017 called A Week in the U.S. And they got to come here and spend a week with me and learn about what we do in the planetarium. They got a chance to talk to individuals, not only students, K through 12 students, but college students. When I presented a college class to them, and they also got to present to the public. It was a great experience. We got to go to the Kennedy Space Center. They cried when they saw the shuttle Atlantis, displayed. They said it was an unbelievable experience. And so we wanted to continue that, and so they invited me to participate in a week in Germany, which was a very exciting thing. And I got a chance to present shows to high school students, to the public, and got a chance to tour Germany. My wife and I, we spent a week before and got a chance to enjoy a little vacation out of it. But what I wanted to present tonight was an experience that I got to see. I got to visit some of the most interesting sites about space history in terms of the birth of the space age. Peenemunde and the McDonald Dora concentration camp, and how that kind of sparked our space race, if you will. We always know about the Americans versus the Soviets fighting to the death, basically trying to get somebody on the moon, all that jazz. But where did this whole thing start? And I decided to, instead of just showing cool slides of where I visited, I wanted to put together a presentation that tells a story. And the main character of my story tonight is the story of what would be considered the father of modern rocketry, Wernher von Braun. I'm sure all of you have heard of Wernher von Braun, right? How many of you have heard of this man?
Oh,
All right, good. So we don't need to spend too much, but I wanted to tell a story about Wernher von Braun from his beginnings to the time in which we get to the development of the Apollo program. Of course, everybody knows Wernher von Braun was the director of the program, Marshall Space Center, and helped basically forge the development of our rocket program here. But really, before that, what was he doing? And how did my experience in Germany kind of pave the way for that? So I'm going to go into that. So again, for the recording here, you will not see me anymore. You will only hear my voice.
Thank goodness.
Hey now, hey. It's going to be on there forever, Richard. Okay. All right, so first things first, I'm going to go into kind of a little bit of the history of Germany. Believe it or not, modern rocketry, and of course some people might say, but Derek, rockets started in China with, those are fireworks, those don't really count. Modern rockets originated with what we call the Society of Space Travel, the VFR. Some of you might have heard about that in space history and things like that. I'm going to bring down the music just a little bit lower there. And the VFR was a society of intellectuals, of engineers that were building a society of space travel, developing the necessary means for the development of space travel. So these are the earliest experiments and designs of rocketry. And the heyday of the VFR was between after World War I, about 1918 to about 1933, and we'll explain why 1933 was the end of the VFR. But the gentleman on the right is a young Wernher von Braun. It was said that according to Wernher von Braun's memoirs that he built his first rocket when he was the age of 10. He struck two large, small compared to what we have today, rockets onto a wagon and basically created the first rocket wagon. Isn't that cool? But people realized his genius. They realized his desire to go to space, and so eventually he joined the VFR, and that's him right there. That's Wernher von Braun right there. Young Wernher von Braun there, and everything was going well. The society was. He was contributing to the rise of space. It was his desire since at a young age to go to space. to become a spacefaring world. And so the origins of modern-day rocketry started in central Germany. Except 1933 happened. Does anybody know what might have happened in 1933? Yes. The Nazi Party officially becomes the ruling authority in Germany. You see the rise of Adolf Hitler. And the VFR is immediately abolished. In Nazi Germany, rocketry was considered non-essential. This was a time in which Germany had no military. It was still trying to rise itself back up after the fall of the First World War. And really the only interest of rocketry to the Nazi Party and of course to Nazi Germany was in the military. Now if you're Wernher von Braun and you want to go to space, what's probably the logical thing to do?
You assigning to SS.
We'll go into that. But you join the Nazi regime in some aspect. In the end of the day, Wernher von Braun wanted to build rockets, and the only way to do that was to join the Nazi regime. So in this case, Wernher von Braun got affiliated with the Nazi Party. And you can see him there, that's him behind Heinrich Himmler. And Heinrich Himmler, of course, is the leader of the SS. And there is Wernher von Braun next to his team of staff members, engineers, leaders, military leaders, that ran what we call Peenemunde. And Peenemunde Army Research Center is what the official name is, becomes the place where we see the development of what's called the A4 rocket. The A4 rocket, later on when we get into the end of World War II, will become known as the Vengeance weapon, also known as the V2 rocket. But basically, here we have a young man wanting to aspire to build rockets. And at the end of the day, he really wanted to build rockets to space, and he had to assimilate into the society in order to do it. But of course, nothing is ever truly black and white. There's some gray areas to this, and we'll talk more about that when we get to the Dora encampment there. Now, Peenemunde is located right off the Baltic Sea, and it's an island. Well, the town is off of an island, and it made a great spot for the development of rocketry. Well, just like here in the United States, we launch our rockets near the ocean because just in case if something happens, they abort the rocket and it goes into the sea. And this is a picture here. There's very few actual pictures of the Peenemunde Research Center during the height of the World War II, but this is one of them, and you can see one of the V2 rockets being launched from the facility. During this time, the V2 rocket was developed, assembled, and researched in this location. But prior to the V2 rocket, we see the rise of the V1 rocket, which actually is considered not truly a rocket, but a flying machine. And the way it worked, this is a picture I took during my recent trip. The V1 was essentially, basically, kind of almost like an aircraft carrier, was pushed off of this rail, and getting a little bit more speed, the rocket would ignite and throw the aircraft in the sky. So it became more of like a homing missile, if you will, a kind of an early form of that. It wasn't a true rocket, what we think of today with the V2 rocket and stuff. So it's kind of the interim period, the transition, if you will, between an aircraft to an actual rocket. Now, the jet engines that were being developed by the V1 were actually going to be assimilated into the jet aircraft that the Luftwaffe was developing during the late parts of the war. So the later Messerschmitt aircraft will eventually develop jet technology, which then of course would be later integrated in the United States and of course the Soviet Union's air forces and such. So really, there's some major developments going on here at Peenemunde. Now, Peenemunde is kind of like the Area 51 for the German army. So there's no aliens, just really high-tech technology going on there. So, and we'll talk about that another time if you're interested. So this is a schematic that Wernher von Braun drew of the A4 rocket. So technically, a lot of people think of the V2 rocket, that's its official name. Technically, its official name is the A4. That's the actual rocket. And it basically uses a liquid fuel system, just like how we launched the Saturn V, just how we launched the Falcon Heavy. Same technology still technically being used today was being used back in that time. So this right here is the A4 engine that will eventually be put into the V2. But what happens is the A4 rocket engine will be integrated into what we know today as the Vengeance weapon. And here I am right there just to give you an idea of scale. This is one of the original V2 rockets. And essentially the V2, the A4 is inside here. And what would be attached here is generally ammunition, bombs. The Vengeance weapons were basically the last line of attacks by the Nazi Party at the time. This was at the end of the war. The Allies were obviously gaining progress. They were slowly taking over Europe again. The Nazi Germany was eventually fleeing back, and this was kind of their last hurrah, basically to kind of bring the morale back to Germany, saying, hey, we're going to do something. And these V2 rockets were being launched off, and several of them hit London and parts of the Netherlands and various other areas of Europe. But believe it or not, more people were actually killed making the rockets than there were actually killed from being hit by the rockets. So were they successful in terms of their militaristic need? No. But they were successful in the sense that we developed rocket technology. Now eventually we get to a period of time in 1943, almost to the end of the war, 2 years prior to the end of the war, we have Operation Crossbow and Operation Hydra. During this time there were a series of bomb raids in Peenemunde between the Allied forces, the United States, the Soviet Union, and the Royal Air Force of Great Britain. They would conduct these bomb raids in this area, and they basically blew up Peenemunde to smithereens. Well, during this time, they caught wind of this and started transporting the remaining supply of V2 rockets and the materials for the development of V2 rockets, of course the engineers, the scientists, the people that would be able to help develop these things, and they traveled down into central Germany, into an area known as the Kohnstein Mountains near Nordhausen, which is an area known as the Minbo-Dora concentration camp. Now during this time, Peenemunde was basically being conducted on paid workers, basically kind of how we have with our space center. But the SS proposed the idea to Hitler that we should continue the development of this program by using prisoners of war and members of concentration camps. So they actually, not too far from this area, is a concentration camp called the Dora concentration camp, which of course led the labor needed to burrow these tunnels, and here we have the original tunnel here, and they would eventually build an underground factory where they would manufacture these rockets. This right here is the photo of the tunnel today. So that's what it looked like when the Allies got there during their raid of this area. And here we have the tunnel today. So you can actually go inside the tunnels and see what they are. Now, of course, they're not like they were back then. The Soviets actually destroyed, basically blew up with dynamite most of the facility inside. So it's basically mostly rubble. But there are pictures that show what it looked like before that actually happened. So here we have some of the workers moving pieces and parts of the V2 rocket around. This is kind of what the tunnels look like back then. They contain obviously ammunition, parts. It basically looked like a secret underground layer like you'd see in Indiana Jones. Think about that. And I felt like Indiana Jones going in these tunnels. I felt like, I was about to battle some Nazis, It's pretty cool. So, and I just lost my microphone, but you guys can still hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, all right, so basically this is what's going down. They're building, obviously assembling these rockets in this location. The engineers that were remaining with Wernher von Braun at the time were working with him. Now, there are some mixed stories in terms of Wernher von Braun's commitment to the Dora camp. Some claim that Werner von Braun never stepped foot in the Dora concentration camp, and there are some testimonies from prisoners that said that he did, and he inflicted bad things onto them, basically encouraged the staff of the camp to treat the prisoners bad, things like that, but that's all speculation. There isn't actually any hard evidence to suggest one or the other, but there have been memoirs from Werner von Braun that he saw this idea of using slave labor as despicable and disgusting. So whether or not he really agreed with this or not, that's still up to debate, but either way, it happened nevertheless. You had a slave labor. Now, unlike other concentration camps during this time, most of the prisoners in this concentration camp were actually prisoners of war. They were usually captured soldiers from the Allied forces, so thankfully there wasn't a whole lot of issues dealing with the Holocaust in this time, but there were still prisoners. And here's some of the a lot of the prisoners were actually forced to live in the tunnels with very little food, very little light. It was a very, very rough time for them, and there's a really cool memorial showing that there. And of course, just like any other concentration camp, it's not exactly the best and most exciting thing to visit. But what was exciting was seeing this history, especially with the tunnels. And looks like Justin just fixed my microphone there. Hey, we're back. Okay, great. So we have this story of this man, Werner von Braun, wanting to go to space, wanting to build rockets. He has to join this Nazi party of Germany to do it. He builds the rockets. Of course, the Allies are basically destroying all this stuff. They eventually head into this part of Germany at the time. The Russians are coming from one side, the United States generally is coming from the other. They meet here, they finally release all the prisoners, and what they do at this point is they start taking over this camp, they start taking over the factory, they start grabbing some of the engineers, scientists, and they start deciding which ones they want to keep, because they're going to integrate them into their own programs. But during this time, Werner von Braun takes his top officials and runs down to a town called Oberammergau, which is located in the Bavarian Alps, and eventually discovers an army of United States troops and surrenders to America. So Werner von Braun makes this logical decision that he doesn't want to be involved with the Soviet Union, he wants to be involved with America, because he feels that America is the one that's going to get him to build a rocket to space. So he actually pushes his top officials down into this area. He is then arrested, brought to trial, but of course later on we see the development of Operation Paperclip, which we'll talk in a few minutes. During this time, when the Dora concentration camp is taken over by the Allied forces, it is obliterated. And what we can see today when we go to those places is we basically see the remains of this factory, and you can see the remains of an A4 rocket. So that's the A4 rocket that developed the V2 Vengeance weapon. So of course that's one on display here. The other parts you can see, it's kind of hard to see here, but these are other parts of all this just rubble and just stuff is thrown everywhere, and essentially these are all old parts of rockets, of parts of just all kinds of different tools that they used. And when I was there, I asked the tour guide, because you actually have to go on a specific tour to go inside the tunnels. You can't just walk in the tunnels by yourself. I asked them if they are continuing excavating the site, and he said that they basically excavated everything to the T. So there's really not much else that they really need to investigate in there, but you never know. There might be something else hidden underneath that rubble that we don't know for sure. So all of these very important people that were helping develop this this project with the V2 rocket, a lot of them were integrated in the United States using through the process of Operation Paperclip, including, of course, Werner von Braun himself. And during this time, interrogations were happening, finding out the secrets of the Germans, rocket technology, and of course, what does that lead to, right? That leads to the space race. So basically, this whole process, this beginnings with this man's desire to go to space, eventually being integrated into the Nazi Party to build a weapon that would be eventually the building blocks for the development of the space program. And of course, later on, Wernher von Braun is eventually led as the NASA director and space administrator for Marshall, and eventually leads the way for Apollo. So the question people ask all the time is that, was Wernher von Braun, even though he was a major in the SS, was he really a Nazi? And I like to think not, because in reality, he had to go based on his culture. What would you have done? That's just a rhetorical question to ask you. What would you have done in his situation? If you were a person that had aspirations and dreams, and you knew what you had to do to make them reality. But in the end, no matter what it is, this happened. And I want to leave my presentation with this quote here from himself, from Wernher von Braun. "It will free man from the remaining chains, the chains of gravity which still lie him to this planet." His desire to leave Earth and to go into space has given us the progress we have today into our future. So I thought it was incredible to be able to be there and witness history unfold and to learn a new perspective of space. An area of space history that very few people talk about, that I wish to enlighten on you all tonight. So, or maybe a lot of you already know this, and awesome. But I just thought it was fascinating, and I wanted to share this wonderful experience with all of you. And I want to thank you all for listening to me talk about some space history for a little bit. And thank you very much, everybody. Any questions real quick before Okay, yes, Barbara.
For those of you who follow me on Facebook know I like to make book recommendations. And there is a really good book on Operation Paperclip. I can't remember the author, but it's a really good book on Operation Paperclip. And one of my favorite lines from the Wright stuff was, "Our Germans are better than their Germans." And there really was a competition between the United States and Russia to try to get, the rocket scientists after World War II. So that line is actually very funny, but there really was this competition between the United States and Russia to grab as many.
Exactly. Yeah, and they were. When they got into the Dora camp and they were getting those scientists, there was this tug of war between who gets what, and eventually, what if Wernher von Braun didn't bring his group down to the Alps and surrendered to the Allied forces? What would have happened? What would have changed? It's those what if moments, right, in history that you.
Just a piece of trivia, by coincidence, Wernher von Braun's widow was my sister's next door neighbor.
Oh, wow. All right.
Two Christmas parties.
That's cool.
Very charming woman.
Excellent. That's really neat. Yeah.
For your information, what this really happens is that he has sabotaged the program and also
Right. Yeah.
because they are further than the technology, and what he would like to do was sabotage the whole program, because he was not agree what they did with London and other cities. And for your information, there are two other factories. That was not the only one. There was one in Normandy and the other one in Hoek van Holland in the Netherlands.
Right.
Because what the Germans like to do is to have a short distance to London. So what they did was a small hop from over the North Sea to England, and the shorter distance is Normandy and Hoek van Holland are the two places direct to England.
Right.
And when
Yeah.
you go to the Netherlands, to Hoek van Holland, you find also the rest of the bunkers and
All right. Well, it looks like I'm gonna have to go with you to these places then, right? You're basically what you're telling me is you need to come with me to the Netherlands and see it.
I'm from the Netherlands.
Oh, okay. All right.
Tour guide.
A personal tour guide. I like that. Okay. All right. Well.
All right. So thank you, Derek. It's always great when, and by the way, if any of you ever go anywhere really cool, that would make a good presentation for CFAS, you should bring it up to the vice president, who's also in charge of programs, and is wearing a red shirt, because we'd love to hear about it. In fact, one of the many programs, I want to talk about my inside tour of the McDonald Observatory. So we really don't care if you go somewhere and you see some pretty flowers, but if it's astronomy themed, this is an astronomy cloud, and so that's pretty cool. Obviously, though, I know exactly what would have happened if the Russians had gotten Wernher von Braun. The Russians would have fit the moon landing long before we did. It's not hard to figure out. So we're going to start our mini program. So we're going to start with Sharife, who has a presentation about SOFIA, which I like SOFIA because not only is it a cool telescope on an airplane, but it's also the name of one of my nieces. So come on up. Give it up for Sharife. By the way, this is the mother of Lupus. If you don't know who this is, Google it.
My name is Sharife, and I went. How many of you are familiar with NASA socials? A few of you? All right, cool. So I went to a NASA social, which is a branch of NASA, which they have social media. People come out to specific locations, launches, events, and document.
There's a button on the bottom. You have to press.
Hello. Okay. So NASA socials are social media events that are put on by NASA. And they have people that have social media accounts to come out to different events. So different launches, different events like this, which I went out to a few months ago to go see SOFIA. And that's in Palmdale, California, an Armstrong Research Center. So how many of you guys are familiar with SOFIA? All right, so a few of you, awesome. So, yeah, heard of it? So I put together a little video, it's about a 6-minute video on what we saw. It was a group of us, I think it was about 50 people or so that went out, and NASA invited us to go out, and they basically gave us a tour of the hangar and of their facilities over there. We got to see real in-depth and behind-the-scenes look at the aircraft that are there. This is about SOFIA, and I have some other information and stuff on the other aircraft that are there, and I have a surprise donation to the club and for a lucky person at the end of the presentation. So stay tuned.
On April 24th, 2019, I had the amazing opportunity to attend a NASA social event in Palmdale, California. The trip out to NASA's Armstrong Flight Research Center was to see SOFIA and a few other NASA aircraft. SOFIA stands for Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy. In other words, a giant telescope mounted on the side of a jumbo jet. SOFIA's bent Cassegrain telescope has a diameter of 2.7 meters and is 9 feet across. The telescope has an interchangeable instrument that mounts on top of the telescope. The instruments have varied purposes for making astronomical observations. And the other aircraft we'd see that day. Fun fact, the hangar where SOFIA and the other aircraft were housed was a filming location for the movies The Terminal and Pirates of the Caribbean. Dave McAllister, the deputy director for SOFIA, gave the first presentation. We learned how the telescope was flown on a Boeing 747 SP airliner. The SP stands for Special Performance, which means the plane has a shorter fuselage with the same fuel capacity relative to other 747s.
When I talk about it, I really believe this is an engineering marvel when you take a look at it.
SOFIA has a cruising altitude of 37,000 feet to 45,000 feet. We learned how, while on the airplane, the telescope sits on a thin layer of oil that is used for stability. This oil, liquid helium, and the cruising altitude all help with cooling the telescope. The telescope alone weighs 17 tons. Pretty amazing stuff.
Cooled by liquid helium. So they service it every day with liquid helium. And the whole point of this liquid helium is actually to evaporate, cool the instrument, cool that detector that's right on the other side of this door.
SOFIA is a joint project of NASA and the German Aerospace Center, DLR. The aircraft that would later become SOFIA was first delivered to Pan American Airways in 1977. In 1997, NASA acquired SOFIA, and so began her journey to show us her first science targets, Jupiter and the M82 galaxy, also known as the Cigar Galaxy. SOFIA's Jupiter images were composed of individual images at wavelengths of 5.4, 24, and 37 microns. These images allowed astronomers to view the warm interior of Jupiter through relatively transparent clouds. Pretty neat for an airplane traveling at a speed of 540 miles an hour to be able to capture images with a pointing accuracy of about 0.5 arc seconds. Recently, SOFIA was able to identify the spectral fingerprints deuterated hydroxyl molecules in the interstellar material between Earth and a protostar. This discovery showed a version of hydroxyl with the hydrogen atom replaced by a heavier deuterium atom. In other words, this helps in understanding the chemical pathway for the formation of water in the universe. How on earth can SOFIA see what she does? SOFIA can do what she does by flying above 99% of the water vapor in Earth's ozone. Because of this, the light seen through the telescope can be viewed in the infrared spectrum. Basically, SOFIA acts like a telescope that's in space, with the benefits of being able to change out the observing instruments as needed. Typically, changing out the instruments takes a few days, which is incredibly efficient for collecting data. Even though SOFIA can't track a moving target, the telescope is able to lock onto small targets in mild to moderate turbulence. It allows astronomers to observe the objects from places that a ground-based telescope could not go. After our tour of SOFIA, we regrouped for lunch, a break at the gift shop, and started the second half of the day. This included an in-depth look at the two ER2s, a DC-8, a C-20, and a Super Guppy. I might include details and footage of these aircraft in a future video. In closing, it was an honor to be a part of this experience. I'll definitely be applying for future NASA events and encourage you to do so too. The NASA staff were incredibly kind and willing to share their knowledge with the group. You'll find more information about SOFIA and NASA social events at SOFIA Telescope and hashtag NASA Social on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. As always, thank you for watching.
So, I can answer any questions, any quick questions about the aircraft itself and not so much about the science because that's changing. But what I do have is some images that I'll leave up here that you guys can take a look at of the images that SOFIA takes with the different telescopes and instruments. And if you want any copies of them, they sent me the PDFs that I can forward to you. I can put a sign up list for that. You just put your email or post on the Facebook group or whatever, and I'll get those to you. And also, I don't know if you want to do this at the end, but I have a one-day pass to Kennedy Space Center. Who has not been to Kennedy Space Center? Okay, I think you're the winner. So they gave me there's a one-day pass in here and then a map with information and stuff about that. And they gave that to me at a first NASA social. I will leave these up here. Instagram accounts, you can feel free to contact me, ask a question.
How many followers do you need to have in your Instagram account?
They don't have a requirement, it's more about engagement and how much, that you have a unique audience that follows you, which as you guys saw, I have a dog account, which of all things, space and dogs, that was what got me in. So it's not a requirement of how many, but more kind of why do you want to do the event? So, yeah, and there's an application, you go to their website and then you apply and fill out a little essay about it. So. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why did you want to become Astrophotographer?
Why did I want to become a part of that? Partly because I wanted to see it. I love aircraft, have always been an interest of mine, and then combining that with, being able to present something here and astronomy and seeing this thing. Also seeing the Super Guppy was a kind of a bonus highlight for me, which is very cool. So,
What's your background?
My background is actually, I'm currently working, I'm a psychotherapist and a teacher, and my background is actually in molecular biology and microbiology. So I've kind of been across the board. Yeah. Question?
How long is an observing run for the plane?
It depends on the instrument and what their project is that they're doing at that time. They'll be up, they fly only at night for reasons that, they have the telescope at night, so you don't blow out all the mirrors and instruments, but they can have the instrument in for a few months and then they switch it out depending on whatever research they have pending. They just recently changed it to the HAWC, it's HAWC plus instrument, and it's what the news that you guys might have seen about the black hole. SOFIA was the instrument that was able to capture the black hole information, the new photos from that. So, yeah, cool stuff. Yeah.
Where does SOFIA fly?
SOFIA flies out of New Zealand and out of Palmdale. So switches, flies between the two, and also does like some rounds in unpopulated areas for not less light pollution and also air traffic. So if you saw the map of the globe and her flight path, it was kind of erratic, so it wasn't like a straight line, which makes it easier when SOFIA is flying in non-populated areas. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Frank.
So was that inside Plant 42?
Which?
Oh, they use the neuralizer on you when you left. Really,
Someone's like going there or trying to find the building.
Yeah.
could not find it. Yeah. All right, any other questions? All right, well, thank you.
Is that on YouTube?
It's unlisted. I have it on my blog also, which I can post a link to it. And you guys
Okay,
can
so check out our
Facebook page.
then for more info. It's pretty cool. I would like to point out the thing that I thought was coolest about that was that telescope has better pointing and tracking accuracy than most of your amateur equipment, and it's on an airplane. Yeah.
Better than the
You'd be doing good to do that in a parking lot, and they're in an airplane. Yeah, Walter. Oh, you're not Walter, sorry. Yes.
You talk about pointing accuracy or resolution is what I'm thinking of, but the Palomar 200-inch telescope is theoretically capable of 3/10 of an arc-second resolution.
Oh, yes.
But however, when they placed it there, at that time, there was no light pollution, so on. But the atmospherics, the natural atmospherics before light pollution, only gave them something like 3 nights per year, where they could get better than 2.5 arc seconds out of it. 2.5 is the number that a 2.5-inch department store refractor would get. So it's just an interesting number about resolution. The atmospherics play a tremendous role.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and being up above that much of the sky is a huge difference. So I'm waiting for when they can put a telescope on a boat and try it. That'll be really cool. All right, so our next mini program is actually me, and I already have the microphone. How handy. So I'm going to show you some vacation photos too, sort of, except it's not going to be a lot of vacation photos. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so last month I talked about my trip to the Texas Star Party, which is in Fort Davis, Texas. And while I was out there, I got an inside tour of the McDonald Observatory, which is really cool. We got a tour by Craig Nance, who's the superintendent of the McDonald Observatory. And I scored this because I'm such a very important person in the astronomy. No, absolutely not. The superintendent of this observatory is friends with the one at Mount Lemmon, and a friend of mine is friends with him, and I'm my friend's friend, so I'm a friend of a friend of a friend, and so I got to go to the insider tour, and it's always good to have friends. So the Davis Mountains of West Texas near Fort Davis, that's where this is located. This is the first of 3 actual observatories that are there. The elevation is about 6,700 feet or so, give or take a little bit, depending on which parking lot you're in. This is the original 82-inch telescope. It was finished in 1939. It's the Otto Struve telescope, named after the first superintendent of the site. Now, what happened was there's a guy named McDonald, and he was a banker, and he had no family, which is very sad. But when he died, he left most of his money, instead of to his distant relatives, he left his money to the University of Texas and said, here's $1 million, go build an observatory. Some of his extended relatives weren't very happy about that, and there was some lawsuits, but eventually the University of Texas still got a large chunk of money with which to build an observatory. The one little thing about it was, at the time, the University of Texas did not have an astronomy program. So they knew nothing. So they actually teamed up with the University of Chicago, and Otto Struve was actually from the University of Chicago, and he came out and scouted the area and actually found this location. Really kind of interesting, these mountains were of no use to the cattle ranchers, and they actually got 3 mountains donated for the property to then build the observatories on, which was pretty cool. All of the observatories are up here mainly do spectroscopy, which is a way of, you study the light from stars so you can tell what they're made of and how all that sort of thing. This is the original Cassegrain spectrograph for the 82-inch telescope. This is actually in a public area, so nothing super behind the scenes about this. But they did let us in to see the telescope itself. It's a very large telescope. Note, let's get a pointer here, the eyepiece right here. They actually were doing the public program that night, and the public was coming in to do observing. I, of course, could not attend. But they did have some people up there looking through this 82-inch telescope. It's really a very massive telescope. We got to drive it around. Here's the console. One of the gentlemen there's wife got to sit there. And this console, I mean, I feel like this is like the bridge of the original Enterprise, right? But, it does have like the LCD screen, so that's pretty modern. But I think the joystick and the Saturn there just really sort of completes the story. And you know, you got all these things, and he was very meticulous about, okay, wait till I say, and you know, and anyway, she got to drive the telescope around. One of the things I really got a kick out of is the counterweights. This is the counterweights, but look at these little bitty counterweights here. This is to fine tune it. So it's really funny. If you're an imager in the cloud, you know there's a lot of angst over, you know, do I balance to the west or the east, or should it be perfectly balanced? This is a ginormous telescope, and they're, you know, putting these little counterweights here to just get it exactly right. I thought that was pretty noteworthy. I was really, you know, working for a vendor in the community, I'm really very interested in telescopes and cameras and the equipment of astronomy as much as I am astronomy itself. I took this picture on the wall. This is the original staff of the McDonald Observatory. I thought it was noteworthy to find all the women who were involved in astronomy in those days. There's one right here, and I asked who she was, and nobody knew. So God bless this poor woman, whoever she was. A story, a chip on my shoulder, well, not a chip, I like to get on my soapbox about girls in math. In this day and age, women were employed at the astronomy, at observatories, and you go, oh, they were maids or they were cleaners. No, they did the math. The girls did the math in a room somewhere, and they had a title. They were called computers, and that's where we get the word computer from. So next time somebody tells you that girls aren't good at math, only boys are, all right, that is a cultural thing, and it's a current cultural thing, because if you go back in time 100 years ago, it was only girls are good at math, and math was menial, and boys, it was below boys. So anyway, there's my political blah, blah, blah. We did repeat this photo with our group of accomplished astronomers. I'm very sorry, apparently I did not get the memo that said that I was supposed to wear a black shirt. So that was completely by accident. The next big telescope, I don't know why, but I did not take a picture of the building, but I took a picture of the plaque. I figured that's close enough. The Harlan J. Smith telescope. This was built in the 68 and 69, so this telescope is contemporary with the moon landings. Hang on. It's 107 inches. I gotta look at my notes before I go ahead. And this scope is still in active use every night. This tube here is circulating cool air to keep the telescope from heating up during the day, and it's also filtering particulates that are in the atmosphere. Now, the thing that fascinated me the most about this scope is I just love, I was an engineering major, and I just love how smart ancient people were. And we think, every time you watch Ancient Aliens, I want to roll over, because it's like, we were smart. There were nerds in ancient Greece too, and they figured out a lot of things we didn't need aliens. Well, even 50 years ago, it's amazing the sorts of things they figured out that would be beyond us today. One of which is the back of this telescope. There's a maintenance guy who's there. This whole floor raised up, and he's doing some tweaking and everything. But you see all this stuff on the back of the telescope? That's a fusion plasma drive, so we can shoot down UFOs. No, it's not. Just kidding. Actually, what that is, it's a weight system. There are hydraulics here and weights. And I'm like, oh, so a computer moves these weights around as the telescope moves. Because what happens when you have a mirror that big, it flexes. And depending on where you're pointing, it flexes in different ways. The stresses on the mirror change. And the superintendent, he was just like, oh, you cute young man. There's not a computer that figures all of this out. A bunch of people did the math, and they figured it out. And it's completely analog. All of these weights and hydraulics and everything they just work. So it's like a clock. No matter where this thing is pointed, the weights shift in such a way that it pushes and tugs on the mirror to counteract the forces on the mirror from gravity. So it keeps the mirror from deforming. And I think that is the coolest thing I have seen so far this year. That is just so amazingly cool. We are a smart species. We can figure some stuff out. Yes, sir?
Russell Porter, who many of you may know from the amateur telescope making books, originally devised that system for the Palomar 200-inch telescope.
Well then.
That's a Russell Porter.
A Russell Porter. Well, he neglected to mention that on the tour, but that's very cool. Russell Porter. So, if you've ever been to a star party and you see these people in their little tents with a couple of laptops out, this is the control room for that telescope, and I just thought, that looks pretty cool. They got the time up and lots of big monitors, and that's neat. Next up was the Hobby Everly telescope. This is what it looks like if you're a tourist. And if you're not a tourist, they take you past this sign, which I just thought, hard hats are cool, but potential oxygen deficient atmosphere. I'm like, I'm taking a picture and I'm going to tweet this before I die, because this is the way to go. It is a hard hat required area, and I found this to be fascinating. They have a bunch of pink hard hats. I asked about it. This is actually an OSHA recommended practice. Employees are issued a hard hat, and they often leave them at home, and then you have to send them home to get it. Strange thing happens. If you forget it, that's fine. Wear a pink one all day. Suddenly, employees do not forget their hard hats. And of course, they got the matching ensemble as well. And I thought, that is very, very clever. If you see somebody walking around in a pink helmet, you know they were in too big a hurry this morning and hit snooze one too many times. Here's the other side of that tourist center, and this is a really cool telescope. It's made out of 1 meter segmented mirrors. So these are all little hexagons going across. It's an 11 meter, it depends on who you ask if it's 11 meters or 10 meters, but the website says 10 meters, but they were saying it was 11 meters when I was there, so I'm going to go with that number. But there. Now the really cool thing is this is not active optics. These aren't bouncing around. They're just built this way because it's more economical than building a large mirror that size. The second coolest thing I've seen, other than the pneumatic device, is the fact that this thing can only rotate. It can't tip or tilt. Up at the top, it actually tips and tilts. So it tracks the sky using the secondary assembly. And I was just fascinated by the math involved to do that. It's really cool. Here's there's a large concrete donut that this thing spins around on. And so it's at a certain angle, tilted, and it can rotate around the z-axis. And then the thing at the top kind of moves it around. And it gathers more than 10,000 spectra in every single image with a big fiber optic cable. It was really cool. Also, of course, the Fort Davis Mountains and McDonald Observatory is home to Stardate. If you've never heard the radio show Stardate with Sandy Wood, congratulations. I'm so excited for you because you have so much wonderfulness to discover for the very first time, and you can only discover it for the first time. So go home and Google Stardate and Sandy Wood. They played on NPR and other venues, and it's really cool. So the coolest insider thing that we got to do was we got to go into the vault. There are some things they put in the vault so that the public, for protection for whatever reasons. And of course the vault, I was a little disappointed. First, okay, we know where Santa apparently spends his summers. But there's paper towels in the vault, and I'd swear these are jars of ragu back here. So, okay, it does look like a real vault, but apparently, it wasn't nearly, I thought this is so cool, we're going to see the vault. But there are some cool things. If you're into history, there's some very old, nice things. Now, my friend who got us this tour, super nerd that he is a big fan of Edward Bernard, and the Atlas of Selected Regions of the Milky Way. They have one of the original 100 copies of this at the observatory. And the really cool thing about this, he's been talking to me about this, for like a year. He's like, oh, the Bernard thing, it's all online. A friend of his bought one of the original books, and it was $17,000, and he just wants to see one and touch it. And they have one there. And so he's like, I want to see it. So they let us in, and they let us look at it. And he's like, Bernard handpicked the photos in the book. And I'm like, well, big deal. All right, I've got lots of books. They've got photos in them, and who picked the photos is no big deal. No. I don't understand. This is a very old book. They didn't do it that way. These are actual photographs in the book. And these photographs were handpicked by Bernard. And of course, I was the first one to open it up and look at it, and we were talking to one of the ladies there that was let us in. She said, yeah, a lot of people are interested in this. She says, most of them don't touch it, though. Whoops. Yeah, well, they didn't have any gloves or anything. And, they're not that old, but yeah, I was pretty impressed with this. So, by the way, if you Google Atlas of Selected Regions of the Milky Way, my friend's a big fan of dark nebula. So if you're into dark nebula, this is like the resource that you should be aware of. Try to find a reprint somewhere, or it is available online on the web as well. So anyway, nothing like a self-portrait there. So we're going to do, anyway, that was my trip to McDonald Observatory. It was kind of cool. So we're going to do astrophotos next, and one astrophoto I did not send to Derek, and I'm just going to show you now because I referred to it at the beginning of the program, and somehow things didn't work out as I thought they would in my head. So here it is now, and I just want to point out that there are dozens of low Earth orbit satellites in this photograph, and you can't see any of them. So all our low Earth orbit satellites are not visible. Now Elon Musk, he made some silly tweets. I'm not gonna defend him. He made some silly tweets, but not all satellites are visible to the naked eye, and that was the point that I was making at the beginning of the program. And if they want, they can make those satellites nearly invisible. And that's all I have to say for now.
Is that a KPP?
That is, no, it's near KPP.
I mean, when you have your Stardust.
Yeah, that's Stardust Ranch. That's our observatory down there. Okay, and now I believe Derek is up, and then we're gonna have Bob talk for a while.
Was there anything special about the low oxygen environment?
Oh, I'm sorry. Any questions? Oh, yes. It could be, they use nitrogen. So apparently they were using liquid nitrogen for cooling stuff, and apparently it leaks a lot. So the atmosphere could be rich in nitrogen and poor in oxygen. So it wasn't that there were poisonous fumes. I was hoping it was helium and, we could all swap or speak or something. But, he said, yeah, if you just feel like you need to take a nap, you should leave the room before you lay down. So I'm like, okay.
All right. Real quick before I go on, I did get a chance to visit the ESO headquarters in Germany when I was there too. And I got a chance to see the clean room where they're building the extremely large telescope. So that was pretty cool too. So observatories, if you ever get a chance to go to an observatory, go to an observatory and,
Really cool.
Yeah. So, all right, so as for those that are new, every month we submit photos from our amazing astrophotographers throughout our society. And so I curate all those and present them to you all. So if you happen to see your photo, I believe everybody that submitted a photo is here tonight. So if you have submitted a photo and you don't mind sharing a little bit of information about what it is, what you use to take the photo, and any other information you'd like to share about it, please say it. Please just mention it. You don't have to worry about officially standing up or anything. Just say it out loud. And usually what I like to do is I like to start with planetary imaging first and kind of work our way out into the universe from there. So we're going to start with this one here. So who do we have?
That's mine.
All right.
And I took it Monday night at the event you wish you were at if you weren't there. So this was with my cell phone, with a cell phone adapter on the telescope. This is really cool. By the way, it's not cell phone photography. I went to a camera club meeting, and saying that it's a cell phone camera is very demeaning and people don't take you seriously. They're called flat cameras. Yeah. So this is flat camera astrophotography. I do this every month at the Coffee and Cosmos event at Starbucks. People come and they just are so excited to look at the moon, and then they put their cell phone on there and they can take pictures of the moon. And it's really quite amazing. This is not lucky imaging. This is not a real expensive setup. This is just a telescope with an eyepiece and a little adapter from Celestron that costs a little more than $50 that holds the camera, and a flat camera. In this case, an iPhone, but it could also be an Android or whatever. I don't like what those phones do for noise control. So if you're a pixel peeper and you want to zoom in, it's not going to be as good as one of Bill Costring's shots or something that I might have spent more time on. But this is not too bad. And it's very easy to get the public excited about this and interested in the moon. And that's pretty cool. So there you go.
All right, thank you, Richard. All right, our next picture is this one.
Wow.
Ooh, speaking of Jupiter.
Might have done that.
Okay, so I was using the 9.25 SCT for that with atmospheric dispersion corrector, 2x Barlow, and a ASI 224 MC camera. It's a 3-minute AVI. I got about 47,000 frames, and I stacked about 30%, and then took a stack of registacks for a little bit of sharpening and wavelengths.
Did you say you stacked so many?
Yeah, 30%. It was a 30% stack and auto stacker, and that was a really good night. That was my last imaging session, so that was a really good night. I took actually 44 AVIs that night and got about 550 gigs worth of data, which is making me assess my laptop situation. I'm having an upgrade.
Father's Day is next Sunday.
So, yeah, fun.
So for those that, it sounds like he's speaking a foreign language, and there's a lot of, when you deal with astrophotography, especially if you're not accustomed to it, there's a lot of technical jargon in it, and we are actually looking at hosting some workshops on doing this kind of stuff. So if you seem interested and you want to tackle this stuff, we have opportunities for you to do that. So, again, we'll flip on there. The most important thing when you're doing planetary imaging is instead of taking single photos, is stacking them using this very, very, very high frame rated camera that's allowing you to get some really, really, really insane amount of data, as Bill mentioned, to get this kind of information. So it's a lot of fun. But this isn't just his only planetary image. He does have a double feature.
Derek,
This,
hang on.
yes.
This picture was taken when the GRS was going through that little phase where it was.
Yes,
some of it was getting pulled off.
Correct.
Yeah, where you had the pointer there at about 10 o'clock is a part of it that's starting to rip off. You can see the red getting pulled off of it, and then it gets sucked underneath and it gets spat out. And I'm glad that stopped because I love GRS.
Yes, so the GRS is doing some very, very strange things at this point in time. All right, our next photo is of another planet that's visible this time of year.
And that was Saturn. That was taken right before sunrise the same night. I only got like maybe 4 videos of Saturn that night, and that was one of 2 that was decent. But seeing was starting to really fall apart at that point because the sun was coming up. But
What are you stacking on this?
that's a 30% stack also, but only of maybe 35,000 frames.
Only. All right, and just had a quick question, Bill. What's the average length of an AVI that you do with these?
With Jupiter, I do 3-minute AVIs. With Saturn, I tend to do 4 or 5-minute AVIs because there's less cloud detail that you have to worry about getting smeared by the rotation of the planet.
Yeah,
so you can afford to go longer, and you're not going to see that smearing by the rotation of the planet.
Right, yeah, Jupiter, 10 hours of rotation, so very, very quick. And actually, when we were at the Jupiter opposition viewing, we could see the entire motion, the entire gray-red spot move across the field of view of Jupiter, which is pretty incredible. All right, the next photo is my photo. I do a lot of wide field astrophotography. I enjoy doing it because it gives you a sense of where everything is in our universe. So I want to talk a little about this picture here. Not too long ago, I went to a site up in the panhandle of Florida, which is one of the more darker regions of our state. Very, very nice. The seeing was great, transparency was great, and I had a lot of fun with it. And of course, you can see at this time of year, we have the planets Jupiter and Saturn. Of course, obviously, you're taking a very long exposure. These were 5-minute sub-exposures. So in astrophotography, we take sub-exposures and stack them to reduce the noise and increase what we call signal, which is the stuff we really want to see. And here we have Saturn and Jupiter, and of course, being at a 5-minute exposure, these objects are fairly bright in our sky, so you're going to blow them out a little bit. But we got a couple of other things in this part. This is looking towards what we call the Sagittarius area of our Milky Way galaxy. In the summertime here in the northern hemisphere, we see the core of our Milky Way looking towards the center. And in the wintertime, we look towards what's called the Orion Spur and the Perseus arm, which are on the outer edges of the main arm that we're located in our solar system. We're kind of like in the Lake Mary Sanford of our Milky Way. And we're looking more towards Orlando here, and then in the wintertime we look more towards like Bithlo or Chiliota or something like that, you know, away from kind of the sprawl of the urban world, if you will. And so here we have a couple of objects. We have the Eagle Nebula, which of course is where we find the Pillars of Creation, a very famous object, and many other objects that we have in here. The War and Peace is also known as the Lobster Nebula. So you might, I had one person when I posted this going, well, it's technically a lobster nebula. I'm like, look, there's multiple names of these things, but I like War and Peace because it just sounded cool. So Sagittarius A star, which is located roughly around this area, is our supermassive black hole that we have in the center. And this is hopefully where the Event Horizon Telescope is going to provide us images of this area soon. But this was taken with a 100 to 400 millimeter lens through a Canon 100 to 400 millimeter lens and a cooled 6D camera. So unlike a normal camera, this camera sensor's cooled. When I say normal camera, I mean normal DSLR. Most astronomical cameras are cooled. This one takes a normal DSLR, kind of converts it into a more astronomical camera, and this actually reduces the noise even further. And so when I took this photo, reduces noise, increases the signal, you get this image here. So this was taken, again, located in the the Panhandle area known as Porter Island, which is kind of out in the middle of nowhere in the Panhandle of Florida. All right, any questions?
How long did you say that exposure was?
This was, each sub-exposure was 5 minutes, and I was using an AstroTrack. I forgot to mention that's probably very important. I was using a special tracker designed to primarily use for like DSLR and wide field astrophotography. All right, our next image is that of a star. So, and I believe this is Barbara Harrison.
Yeah, every year I take an image, usually around the first week of June, of Barnard star, which is the fastest proper motion star in our galaxy. So every year I take a picture and I stack those images and to get an image showing the motion of the star. And usually I like this is considered pretty picture, but it's also scientific because I also take pictures of it because it's a variable star. And there was a campaign 2 years ago to measure the variability of Barnard star over several months. And because of this campaign, they were able to confirm that there was an exoplanet around Barnard star. And there was a paper published from it, and because I was able to do photometry of it over several months, my name was on the paper also. But this is one of my pet projects where I like to take a picture of Barnard star every year in June to show the fast, proper motion of the star.
Do you know what the V shape is on the bottom?
It's just a group of stars, nothing special. And Barnard star is about 9.5 magnitude, so you can get an idea of its brightness compared to other stars in the picture. And this is about a 15-second exposure so that it doesn't saturate.
Is it the fastest star relative to our position, or is it literally like the fastest star?
It actually is not the fastest star. It's fast because it's so close to us. It is fast, but it moves really fast from our point of view because it's pretty close to us.
Barbara, you took this from your planetarium at your house?
Yeah, my observatory at home.
All right. Okay, speaking of, so this was just of one star, and our next photo is of many, many stars.
This is a globular cluster. I'm losing my voice. Thank you, Derek. Globular cluster in55. It's low to the south, and this is only 70 minutes worth of exposure time. It was a 6-inch refractor and a cooled CCD camera. The individual exposures were only 2 minutes, so we've been talking about stacking. So you take a bunch of short exposures and you combine them, and it doesn't actually make the image brighter. What you're doing is you're improving the signal to noise ratio. So you get a nice clean image that's with very smooth details instead of a lot of grain and a lot of noise. It is summertime, so it's galaxy